Doing that, I have a really great guest on the program who's been on before, and her name is Mary O'Sullivan. And Mary is the owner of Encore Executive and Professional Coaching, and her website is encoreexecutivecoaching.com. And we're talking today about behavior at work in terms of your career. What if you're burned out? What if you want to find a new job? What if you lose your job? What do you do during all of these times? So welcome, Mary.
Hello, Patricia. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Yeah, so glad to be with you. So, one of the things I know you talk about is that when we have, we may want to get a new job, but sometimes we don't realize that if our behavior is not professional, we really can sabotage our career choices.
Right. It's amazing that people are not aware of these things. And I think what happens, particularly for those that have lost their jobs or have been laid off or quit, is they have not been on interviews or in the working world for a long time, so they forget. And we talked a while back about a survey that was done by Harris for some HR managers. And the results were just unbelievable. But there was also recently an article in Money Talks magazine that brings up some other really unusual things that people do during interviews, which are completely unacceptable. And this was also another survey that was done of 2,400 hiring managers. And so some of the things that people need to avoid are talking or bad-mouthing their previous employer. Mm-hmm. And one of the findings of this survey was that there were people that provided a detailed list of how previous employers made them mad. Now, I actually had a client that went through this exact same thing, which I found was really just incredible, that she began her interviews by telling the new hiring manager about all the woes of her previous job. So as incredible as it sounds, people do that. So another thing that happens is lots of times you go into a hiring manager's office and they have things on their desk. And last time we spoke, I talked about a person who took a picture frame off the person's desk and put it in her purse. So how is that person going to get hired with stealing something right in front? Now, that was an actual finding. I'm not making that up, as hard as it is to believe. But in this particular case, another finding was that there was a candy bowl on the hiring manager's desk, and the person who was being interviewed ate all the candy from the candy bowl while simultaneously trying to answer the interviewer's questions. So that's not a good thing to do.
I mean, it's kind of amazing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's all self-sabotaging behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean...
Other things like answering a cell phone or texting during the interview. This particular study says that the 69% of the people dressed inappropriately, 69% appeared disinterested, 66% appeared arrogant, 59% were chewing gum. So these are not good things to do. So what are the alternatives? So I guess people are really stressed, or just they haven't been coached properly, or they haven't been taught proper professional behavior. So one of the things, and I always tell my clients is always keep it positive. Always keep it upbeat. Never say anything negative. Don't ever use even a word like I'm afraid, or I'm afraid I can't answer that. Don't use that terminology. I was just rehearsing that discussion with a client earlier this week, where she was telling me about an interview situation where she was asked over the phone to provide some examples of documentation that she had produced for her previous company. And she said, I'm afraid I no longer have access to that. And I said, it wasn't the point that you no longer have access to it, but that you used that term. It was a negative. Mm-hmm. It was a negative way to start the conversation.
What might she have said, Mary?
So what I coached her to say was that I'd be happy to provide you with any material that can support your question. However, I no longer have access to company material. Simple. Mm-hmm. You can hear how that just changes the entire tone of the conversation. So I try to encourage people to do that. Always be positive. The other thing is keep your decorum about you. Keep it professional. Even if you're sitting in a casual setting like a Starbucks, don't get into personal things. Don't get into family issues or, your recent divorce. This is not the time to unload your emotional feelings. Keep it very professional and focus on the job that you're interested in and selling yourself. So always keep it on the up and up. And that's not that hard to do. You just have to remember those things. The other thing that I encourage people to do, and I do this in my business, is when I'm coaching someone who's going on an interview, we practice. So we go over the scenario. We practice the words that they should choose. Sometimes it upsets them, and they say, well, that's not the way I really talk. And I said, you only have to talk like this once to get you in the door, right? You don't have to pretend you're somebody that you're not, but just be very careful. So I'm willing to practice with my clients, but I also tell them, take what we're doing here and go out and practice with a friend, practice in front of a mirror, practice saying the words that we've discussed, and practice eliminating these negative words. The other thing that's important is your body language. That's very important. Sitting up straight, not being sloppy, all those things. And be honest. Be honest with the person. Don't try to pretend that you know something that you don't. If you don't know an answer, just say, I don't have an answer for that. But if you needed that information, here's how I would find it for you. Okay. So you want to make yourself stand out from other candidates and get the job. And that's always my message to my clients is what's going to distinguish you from everybody else. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's very much about, well, some of it's common sense. I mean, some of the stories you just told, you can't imagine that people would do that. And as you said, it's self-sabotaging behavior. And so if you do have clients like that, you probably have them look at why did they behave that way, right?
Well, I try not to get too far into the why. I just try to point out the effect that it has on the interviewer. So, in other words, if you're going to use negative language like the word afraid, that word immediately has a connotation that's unconscious in the interviewer. So what I try to do is not delve into the why, but flip it and get more into the what. So what do you think the effect on, what does it sound like to you when I say I'm afraid of something?
Exactly. So you help them to see it.
You're not focusing on the conversation. You're focusing on that negative feeling that word gives you. You see what I'm saying? So there's a little difference there. Rather than get into why are you doing this, it kind of for an interview, it doesn't matter why. It's that they have to sort of learn to change the behavior.
Yeah.
Just simple modifications. And I don't ask anybody to make these gigantic leaps. The most important thing is it's kind of like the analogy of a clock that eventually that minute hand is going to turn that clock 24 hours. But if you've ever sat in a hospital waiting room, and I know you have, Patricia, and you've watched the clock while somebody's in for surgery or in for an emergency or something, that clock never seems to move. But with that tiny second hand moving, eventually the hours advance. And that's what I tell people. You don't have to go from one thing and jump right to the next, but just make a couple of small changes. And eventually you're going to advance as far as you want to go, just by these little micro changes.
All right, we've got 3 minutes to break, and then we're going to come back. So just touch on this question, which is if you're burned out at work, so now you're not looking for a job yet, you're burned out, but you can't quit because you're overextended. How do you handle that? Because that attitude is going to carry over into your behavior. So how do you handle that?
Right. Well, in that particular case, if people are really burned out and they can't quit, they've got obligations. This is the sandwich generation where they've got kids in college and they've got parents they got to worry about. My advice in that particular case is kind of what the airlines tell everybody. You know what the airlines tell you in that little 2-minute speech they give before the flight takes off, right? In case of a cabin decompression, the oxygen masks are going to drop from the top. What are you supposed to do first? You put your mask on first, right? Because I did a little research into this. If you don't take care of yourself first, the person sitting next to you, whether it's a disabled person or your child or whatever, they're going to die. You're both going to die. So you only have 12 minutes of oxygen in those air masks. And after that, everybody goes unconscious. So you've got to get that oxygen mask on yourself first. So that's my advice.
And it's good advice,
that generation.
Too. All right.
You have to take care of yourself.
Tell people how they can find you, and then we're going to come back, and after the break, we're going to talk about if you are overextended and you want to start looking, how do you network effectively? How do you approach strangers? How do you present yourself? And then if you lose your job, which is a little different, because if you've now lost your job and you're not networking because, you may want to find something, but now it's a necessity, how do you handle that? And also take steps to, recoup your income and get over your anger and your pride. So that's what we're going to talk about after the break.
Exactly.
How can people find you? And do you do consults over the phone?
Absolutely. I do consults over the phone. There's no extra charge for that. I'm on the web. I'm at www.encoreexecutivecoaching.com. And my phone number is area code 401-742-1965. And it's Mary O'Sullivan.
All right. Your number again, 401-742-1965.
Right.
All right. Terrific. All right. We're going to take a quick break. My guest is Mary O'Sullivan, and she is a certified coach, and her company is Encore Consulting. It's Encore Executive and Professional Coaching. And she is a professional coach. She's been in the corporate world for many years and now is helping other people who may want to leave the corporate world or may want to find another job. And in that period, what do they do? EncoreExecutiveCoaching.com, 401-742-1965. You're listening to The Patricia Raskin Show right here on VoiceAmerica.com, America's Voice, and we'll be right back right after the break. And we are continuing our terrific discussion with my guest, Mary O'Sullivan, who is the owner of Encore Executive and Professional Coaching. And her website is EncoreExecutiveCoaching.com. And we're talking about what to do, on in the job when you want to find another job. How do you do that? And if you've been let go, what are the steps you take? Welcome back, Mary.
Thank you, Patricia.
All right. So if you're networking and you have to approach strangers and mingle and present yourself because, let's say you're in a job, but you're not happy and you really want your next step. What should you know, particularly for networking and knowing how to present yourself and explain what you do and give your pitch?
Well, there's a couple of things that I recommend that people do, particularly people that have not been in circulation for a while. And again, this is another thing that I rehearse with people who really are self-conscious. They've been either out of the workforce for a while or they haven't had to look for a job for a while. So most people are very self-conscious, so we work on their confidence building and proper attire and whatever, and I recommend several different networks